General Vagon has called the Battle of France is over. The Battle of Britain is about to begin.
Welcome to the Lead Pursuit Podcast, a podcast covering Blood Red Skies, a game of World War II aerial combat. Good evening and thanks for joining us. Tonight we're going to give another preview like we did of Mig Alley, but of the next generation of game that's coming out. It's called Airstrike. If you haven't listened to the podcast and heard us talk about it in the past, it's an introduction of air-to-ground rules into the Blood Red Skies universe. Now, before you get too excited that we're simulating close air support for Marines in Okinawa, or there's really highly detailed rules for hitting sub-pens and different dams with bouncing bombs, it's a very bare-bones rule set. I know, Chris, you've taken a look at it. Brett, you've looked at it as well. Guys, were you surprised by how short and small the rule set was?
I know for me, I've been looking forward to attacking ground targets, and right now it's thin. I've got hopes that we're seeing some initial stuff. I'm not saying it's bad. That's why I chose the word thin. It seems like it needs more. And
Okay.
and we'll see how that develops as time goes on. But plus part of it for me too, and I know it has been for you guys too, is that everything we've been seeing so far has been kind of spread out in different locations. So we're reading multiple documents and multiple versions of documents, trying to put it all together. And I'm thinking once it gets the Warlord treatment and gets into one tome, it's going to be much better.
Yeah, I'd hate to think what it was like to read Warhammer rules that were just in a Word document instead of actually in a codex with pictures and diagrams and things to help us Marines not eat the crayons that come along.
That hurts my head.
What, eating the crayons or figuring out 7th edition Warhammer?
No, I like crayons.
But so you like 7th edition as well because you play 30K. Apparently, you didn't want a simplification of the rules.
I do. 8th edition is for clowns.
Oh,
clown shoes.
Well, I like the clown shoes, and it plays fast.
It's silly and worthless.
Oh,
it is
silly and
shoes.
Okay.
Hey,
where's that boot? Chris from podcast button. Let me find that now. All right, Brett. I know you were going to say something serious in there.
Well, I was just going to say, I've read through it a bunch of times, and I'm admittedly not super fast. I mean, I just about anything that comes in written instructions, I need to fully wrap my head around it. I've got to put my hands on it and play with it a bit. So I don't want to make any strong. Yeah, that's awesome.
Sorry.
It's all right.
I'm just gonna leave that one unsaid.
Yeah, let's not.
That should go straight.
Me laughing is good enough.
We'll push that one off to the
all
corner
right.
of the
Well,
table.
hey. Anyway, as Brett was
yeah.
saying before he wrapped his head around it, never mind.
Whatever. I got real tactile with it.
Man, I've had too much to drink for you to keep doing this.
This is why we don't drink beers before the podcast, boys. Whew. Okay, back on the subject.
Okay. So I don't want to make any really definite statements. It's certainly not in a negative, because as I look at it, I'm pretty excited and satisfied as I read through it, and I'm seeing things like with the the flak mechanic and the terrain mechanic and the way the aircraft behave, and depending on what kind of ordnance they're delivering or what kind of aircraft they are, or what kind of run they're making. So I feel like it's got some complexity there that, I'm just really anxious to get my hands on it and work with and see how it plays out. It looks to me like a lot of fun. I compare that to some of the things we're thinking about for, our own custom missions and stuff like that we're, trying to develop. And I see a lot of parallels, and it's pretty cool.
There's a lot of cool things, and you kind of have to break the pre-release information up into a couple categories. There's the core rules themselves, which we'll talk about in detail, some of the concepts. There's what I call the add-on rules, like flak or defensive flak, specifically terrain, things that you might use in some of the scenarios, you might not, and they're interesting additional concepts. And then there's the actual target cards and the target rules for the ground targets you strike, whether they're ships, trains, airfields, industrial facilities, whatever. The kind of, here's what we think the stats for those and the values of those are. And so there's always a little bit of taking it with a grain of salt, because you're sometimes comparing apples and oranges. You're comparing target cards from a previous revision with what you see now from the current revision, and trying to figure out where the two roll out. What what I really enjoy though is that to me it is added a little bit of complexity, but it's still boiled things down fairly simply. I mean, you have strafing attacks, you have bombing runs, you have torpedo runs, and you have dive bombing. And so
It looks playable without being
yeah,
overly
so
cumbersome.
so you have 4 basic attacks there, of which if you really don't care about ships, we can throw away the torpedo run. But you've got 4 basic styles of attack in there, and each of them have some considerations. They still have all been um, flight compressed into generally using the 6-inch range stick, which is kind of a funny mechanic that I actually really kind of like. And I like the fact that you sit there and still it's just like shooting a gun attack. It's no different. You sit there and you, all right, I can shoot a torpedo 6 inches. I can run a level bomb attack 6 inches. I can do a strafing attack 6 inches. I think all of us realize the physics for every single one of those is different and it doesn't fall out to the same exact range. But once again, we have a firing template. Why would we choose 3 inches? You know, do we now need a 3 inch and a 6 inch? 6 inch allows a little bit of plausible, you know, or pushing the I believe button, as we would say. You know, it fits it
Depression
all.
we talked about, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I think one of the uh, pieces that's a little confusing when you read through the rules is it walks you through the different attacks somewhat sequentially in their complexity, um, but it doesn't start you off with kind of here's the ground rule of all air to ground actions because they are all very similar. But the cool thing is when you look at it, and you look at the assumptions for like a strafing attack and some of these other things, we get back into that mechanic of disadvantaged is a combination of being at low altitude and being in a bad position. But to make a guy get down low enough to actually do a strafing attack, the only real way to categorize him in this rule set is disadvantaged. So I know some people are going to lose their mind immediately because that means the guy that's down at 1,000 feet trying to strafe a truck is automatically meat for everybody else to roll in on and shoot. What do you guys think about that?
No, I mean that makes sense. I mean, when you rolled in and you were doing an attack, you were meat. I mean, if you didn't have the appropriate air cover at the time that you were executing maneuver in World War II, yes, exactly, you were meat.
And I think
And
that's the exact key right there. What you said, the last part there is people look at the rules a lot of times and think about them in a vacuum with one airplane attacking, one defending. And they're not thinking about the fact that if you went in there in the 1940s, and then if we extrapolate to Korea to the 1950s, and everybody rolled in together, there was nobody watching anyone else's 6 o'clock. So you didn't attack them. So that's absolutely one of the things. If who cares if I'm disadvantaged? I certainly hope I've got a wingman who's neutral or advantaged somewhere back there, providing me wingman cover,
yeah,
keeping somebody from rolling right back in there.
I guess
and I
that's
mean,
kind of
like
why I
the
had that long.
Russians reading. I'm sorry, dude. Go ahead, Brett.
Sorry, yeah. Just thinking that's why I think I stumbled there with a long pause. Is as I imagine these things, I'm imagining a bomber element or some kind of ground strike element, but then there's the supporting, escorts that are going to be involved. So you
Right.
gotta,
And you're not so much denying someone a tailing shot, and someone could still maneuver back in there and shoot at you, which they could have done in the real world. But the fact is there's somebody that's going to punish them immediately for engaging you as you start your strafing run. But go
as
ahead,
as far, as
Chris.
far as the actual as far as the actual run goes, I was thinking that advantage mechanic is going to have more to do with defensive fire and its effects on bombing aircraft than
Well,
attacking
hold that thought
aircraft.
and remind me of that again when we come back to it, because that's a question that's kind of unanswered here, but we'll talk about. Chris, I know you had a comment about the disadvantage mechanic.
No, I was just saying I like the disadvantage mechanic because it's going to force you to play it in a smart way. When we're writing scenarios, you need to be writing scenarios where it's not 4 Sturmovix going to blow up the tanks against the entire Luftwaffe.
Right.
No, it's 4 to 6 Sturmovix going to attack tanks, and there's a couple of Yaks flying high cover. That's the way the Russians did it. It was defense in depth. You know, when the Sturmovix were doing something, the fighters became just support for them. They would fly in high cap. They would watch what they were doing. And when Sturmovix would roll in on a target, they would immediately turn into a giant wagon wheel. The first one would go in, and immediately upon releasing ordnance, he is making a hard turn to get behind the last Sturmovik in the line.
Yep.
They can create this big wheel where if you were dumb enough to come down there in their wheel as a fighter and take a shot at them, there's going to be somebody behind you with
Yeah,
some pretty big cannons. It
so
might not
that
be the best airplane in the world to shoot at you, but you're turning into a tornado of gunfire.
yeah, people can make fun of that all they want, but let me tell you, real world is an F-18 trying to stick your nose into 4 A-10s doing what we call a MiG wheel out there. There's always a really big gun pointed at you, and he probably also had AIM-9s. So defensive tactics like that are absolutely viable. Wouldn't have prevented necessarily me rolling in and shooting somebody, but it would have definitely meant if I did that, I would have exposed myself to a lot of other fire.
Yeah, but all it takes is one cannon to make you have a very bad day.
Yeah,
one round
exactly.
from one cannon
Yeah.
to make you have a very bad day.
Absolutely.
So.
Well, so Brett brings up an interesting point. So the shoot down mechanic, let's just go there and start because I think it's something that needs to be talked about from the earliest part of a strafing attack is you're already disadvantaged there. If flak is shooting back at you and flak hits you and you don't dodge, you die. Now, the question that really I couldn't find in the rules is that considered post attack or pre attack? Is flak shooting at you when you're down there? Is it a defensive attack and is it considered to happen before you strafe, or do you roll all of your dice, do your attack, and then the defensive flak gets to fire at you? Or actually, defensive flak, I should say, is that's really shooting at other aircraft that are around there. Does the flak get to employ against you as you're at what point of that attack does it allow
Like
to
an
shoot?
activation order,
Yeah.
like that we have
Yeah,
with the skill level for the
because
aircraft?
the wording in one of the older documents about defensive flak rules is it says against disadvantaged, defend versus strafing attacks. Well, I can read that as one of two ways. Defend could mean you're shooting a strafing attack, and by me shooting you, I'm able to defend against that attack, i.e., prevent it from happening. Or the other thing is, does it mean defend in that I'm shooting you after you have already shot me?
You
It's
got
almost
it
like
arranged, yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
it's almost
it's
like
kind
you
of like
need an additional mechanic, like roll a d6 on a 3-up. It happens simultaneous, like it does in a head-on shooting attack. Or
yeah.
if it's 3 down, no, the defensive flak fires first, and if you get hit, buddy, you're gone. I mean,
Yeah.
something like that would be a very good way to simplify that and make it a, you know what I'm saying, not an even call almost, so that you actually have something that could take place different ways. Because flak wasn't extremely effective in World War II. I mean, it was, but it wasn't.
Well,
I mean,
so that's the other funny part is, thankfully, at least it was in a previous version categorized into light and heavy flak, and now it's kind of they talk a lot about light flak, and only in the terrain of the scenarios is where I see a reference to heavy flak. So we'll see how the mechanics change out because when you're looking at a lot of the low altitude performance of these aircraft, they threw a lot of up in front of them that didn't necessarily hit them that many times for low altitude attacks. But anyway, so
Now they specify light flak and then flak barrages.
right, absolutely. So really, what we're talking about is what some people incorrectly call flak, that is really just generic anti-aircraft artillery. It's a lot of light stuff, whether it's 12.7 millimeter machine guns, 20 mil rounds being thrown up, a lot of things that are not barrage flak that is going to a certain altitude, detonating at that altitude, trying to create a wall. But anyway, so I bring up the strafing piece because this is a recurring theme with this rule set for me. Just the way it's written is I read through strafing and I don't really, understand how I can shoot and that I could even be shot at until I get down to the follow-on sections where if I skip past bombing and get to torpedoes, it in fact says, torpedo bombers are subject to counterattack. So that's the first time that word is used by light flak attached to the target card, just as if they were making a strafing attack. Holy crap, I didn't know I could get shot at by light flak after reading the strafing rules. I mean, come on, it's implied. We know that. But one of the points I think as this moves from beta to being tightened up is using consistent wording, saying the same thing. Aircraft that are strafing are subject to a counterattack by light flak. Aircraft that are executing a torpedo attack are subject to a counterattack by light flak, because then it makes it obvious it's a counterattack. The effects of your air-to-ground ordnance happen before the flak takes any effect on you. So I think it's just an interesting choice of wording and where it's not necessarily covered in detail. Thankfully, under dive bombing, it uses the same counterattack wording, which makes sense. But
See
dive,
something saying that it works effectively as a head-on shot. So that makes, I mean, without reading further as we're talking here, I would think maybe it's a mechanic where you make your strafing run, and then just like if you were shooting first in a head-on, then the defender, if you want to call it that, then rolls to see if they get a chance to shoot back, right?
well, so I think there's kind of like Chris said, I think there might be used to a mechanic to determine is the flak prior or post attack. And maybe it's 50-50 because we just want to simplify it and make it an easy game. Maybe it has something to do with uh the cards you have. Maybe maybe you should partition dice up and you go, okay, I've got 4 light flak dice. I want to shoot 2 pre, 2 post. Or I want to put all 4 out in front of you.
Yeah. Or
And
maybe it's a mechanic where it's 1, 2 before, 2, 3 during at the same time,
yeah,
and
so it's
4,
simultaneously.
6. I mean, we got
Yeah,
6-sided dice, so that's
yeah.
a 1 to
There's a lot
3
of
mechanic
choices.
is perfect.
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting thing to think about is that using light flak as a revenge mechanic is pretty good here. But I think it also takes away some of the stories where dudes were inbound to the target about to release their weapons, and the fact that there was 4 flak wagons out in the front lawn of the Gestapo headquarters suddenly made it a very bad day for them before they got to their weapons release. But anyway, so that's one thing to think about. And like you said, Brett, hey, I think it makes it easy to be set up and to be shot down because you're already disadvantaged. Well, let's skip a couple things and let's go to dive bomb rules, because dive bombing actually allows you to attack and not be disadvantaged. So you can start neutral, you can start advantaged, you can burn advantage, and the more advantage you burn to get lower, if you end up disadvantaged after it burns, it gives you more firepower, basically simulating, I mean, that dive for longer, hitting bigger targets. But I could theoretically be neutral making this attack if I'd gone burn advantage from advantage to neutral. So the best light flak can do on this dive bomb attack is give me a boom chit, can't shoot me down, right? Because he's gonna roll, he's gonna hit me, it's gonna give me a boom chit. I'm going to then roll and defend, and even if I fail my defense, I just go from neutral to disadvantaged. Interesting thought there. So
Yeah, well, it makes sense too when you just talk about mechanics. When you talk about the physics of how flak works, it's going to a predetermined altitude. And I know that I've read accounts where shooting at dive bombers was extremely difficult because
absolutely,
a dive bomber is changing its altitude so rapidly that it's not like shooting at a level bomber like a B-17. Okay, they're at 20,000 feet today. I can tell that from holding up my little freaking range guide,
yeah,
and I set
exactly.
my flak to 20,000 feet. But a dive bomber is going thousands of feet very quickly, and it flak's not very effective. Ground fire was typically more effective against dive bombers.
Well, and so
And they
that's
have different pilot actions for the different types of strikes too. If I'm not mistaken, dive bombing is a separate pilot action from strafing bombing or torpedo running. If I'm
right. So
not
and with
mistaken.
dive bombing, you have to actually burn advantage. So
Yep.
so you can't start in dive bomb from disadvantage because you have nowhere obviously to burn. So if you roll into this as an advantaged aircraft, you're like, I want to burn advantage, and I want to burn it all the way down to disadvantage because I need extra firepower dice. Because maybe it's a hardened target, moving target, any one of these things we'll talk about that can take away your firepower dice. And it's kind of cool because if you're a dive bomber, as if that is your category in there, you can make a minimum move of 0, which is awesome. So you can be the Stuka in an 89-degree dive. Good luck with that.
You
but
probably have to dive as a pilot action to do that though first, right?
also what you have to do, the wording for it is they execute a dive bomb pilot action if they're playing burned advantage to dive. So you have to dive, but by the way it says is because you're a dive bomber, you can make that as a 0.
Oh, air brakes. That's right.
Right.
That's
Yes.
right.
You use it. So it kind of goes back to the question of, all right, do I have to set myself up way out for this diving attack? No, you don't. Because if you're truly a dive bomber, then guess what? You're doing this. You can only do this kind of attack if you have the dive bomber trait. And if you have that trait, you can do a 0 move. So
Just burn advantage and move 0.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Move 0. Say I'm quote diving, but I'm a dive bomber, so I'm going to move 0, burn down to disadvantage, and get the extra firepower dice. Of course, exposing yourself to light flak. So that
Not to stay stuck on the whole flak piece, but I seem to remember reading something about an alert status that might have some impact on the mechanic or maybe the action order.
So that's something that you see in the target cards, they have alert bonuses out there. It's not in the latest target cards attributes spreadsheet. At least that I didn't see it sitting in there. They just have your light flak dice, your number of point hits and area or hull hits, whatever qualities you have. But that is referred to in some of the actual other files. So, and I'm going to show my ignorance here because I believe it's in a scenario that it first talked about it. But it covers the ability to when you can start firing flak, when the alert is sounded. And let me see if I can find it here real quick in Airstrike. I know that it was under, I think it was probably under either the scenarios or the terrain rules. Let's see here, scenario.
I think I found something about it under just between where it describes light flak and flak barrages. It says most target cards have an alert bonus to their light flak.
Okay, so that was in you can find it in the scenarios in that full rules compilation. That's no longer in the set of rules that I got in this latest burn down. So that's the interesting thing is light flak, that flak information isn't covered in that same section of the rules. Now, I think it probably is in there with a lot of the other things that these beta leaks that we're seeing are chunks that have been knocked fairly smooth. And I'm sure there's still some work going on into the flaks and how that works. But you're right, because there's an alert bonus, which basically says, all right, now the triple or the anti-aircraft guns are going to be fully manned, loaded. So it's much more dangerous than multiple, than just the regular flak. It doesn't really go into it other than that I assume it's just a bonus die if you have like a +1 alert bonus. So it says basically your light flak is that much more accurate, or has that much more firepower. But yeah, that isn't really covered. I didn't see it covered in the new cards.
Okay. Well, it's probably a good idea to clarify for the listener. We're not looking at, any kind of finished product. We're just looking at beta rules, and some of the stuff we have is changing as we speak.
If you want the exact same information we have, not like we have some super secret access, go onto Facebook, Blood Red Skies Ready Room. If you're not a member, request to join, get you in there. And in the Ready Room, there's a files listing, just like any Facebook group. And so go take a look at that files listing. The last two that have been uploaded are the latest beta version of the rules and the beta version of the target cards. And those things can walk you through and give you an idea what we're looking at. And there's some older versions on there as well. So sometimes the files are not easy to find on the Ready Room. They sometimes get knocked down a couple levels. But all the files that we're reading out of have come right out of that library of files. So that's kind of our gouge and our secret leaks that some individuals there have been sending us. But we know it's pretty close to what Andy has been putting forward to the Warlord team.
We talked a little bit about the different pilot. We didn't go into great detail on any one of them really. Maybe more on strafing. Besides the different types of pilot actions, like torpedo run, strafing, bombing, whatever, there's also a lot of different target effects based on the kind of pilot action you're taking. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, strafing has different target effects than high altitude bombing.
Sure. And so I think that really kind of begets a discussion of the two kinds of, well, I'll call them hull points, for lack of a better term, that these target cards have. So
you might not use that because there's a whole damage.
Yeah. I'm trying to put it in 40K terms for all the 40K kids that are out there. Things they understand. Hull points, armor saves. No, but if you look at it, there's each of the targets will have point hits or what's called an area or hull hit, and that's it gets a little confusing in some of the wording. If you don't look at the target cards first and you realize area and hull hits are the same thing, they can just get caused in different ways by different weapons. So if you looked at, let's say, a good example is a rail bridge. It has 2 point hits, but it has 4 area hits. You look at some of the other things like a torpedo boat has 1 point hit and 1 area hit. You get up to things like air bases that have 4 of each. Now, I couldn't find any degradation effects as you lose any of these things. So so I don't think that they're going to lose light flak firepower as you take more area hits, or nor have they defined that, hey, point hits count as flak emplacements you're taking out. But pretty much all the targets have both hits. Now, it doesn't say it unless I missed it somewhere, but it looked to me like, or the implication I read is it takes both point and area hits, question mark. I realize for a ship it makes sense that when I do all area hits to it and I knock its hull out that it's destroyed, um but what happens to a airfield if I knock out all 4 point hits? Because point hits are defined as individual targets like emplacements, vehicles, or aircraft which can be damaged with precision hits or by saturating with lots of bombs. Area hits are larger targets difficult to damage: runways, bridges, rail junctions, large construction. So they're mutually exclusive target sets, but what I don't have a good feeling of, and maybe it's in the scenarios and just shows my ignorance of the scenarios, is do I win by hitting all of them? Do I win by destroying a target, or is it a percentage of hits? And
Right. Yeah, I'm not super knowledgeable on this, but I can see where you're going with that. It could be a victory condition. Could be, if you're doing a mission on your target being an airfield, that you've got to do a certain number of the area hits as well as a certain number of the point hits to win a victory by a certain number of turns or something. Maybe I'm
right,
speculating.
and looking right now at scenario 7, priority target, when you look at the victory conditions, it says target's destroyed, target is undamaged, or target is damaged. And so I just kind of I look at that and I scratch my head and go, oh, so
That was going to be the thing I was going to ask you, is if you had a sense and could walk us through what an example of a target being destroyed, how that would look like. But I don't think we yet know, right? That's still
well, so
clear.
this is the confusing part, because in the victory, there's victory conditions. There's 3 things that can happen: destroyed, undamaged, or damaged. Okay, that's fine. Things like if the target's destroyed, attacking player wins; undamaged, defending player wins. If the target is damaged but not destroyed, count up victory points. And so you scroll on down to the bottom, and then it refers to each point hit scored on the target card is 2 victory points. Each area hit scored is 4 victory points. And I have to roll back and I go, so how do I do both? Is it possible to go out there with a pure bomber force and be able to take out point hits? Because when you look at it, that's exactly what you do strafing runs for, is for point hits. So if you go back out to bombers and you're not using their bombing for altitude, you're basically going to take a look at it and you say, okay, if I success, I get an area hit on the target. But if I get a critical success, I get an area hit and a point hit. So kind of adds a moment for pause there. Go, I can't target the 4 point hits I might need on an airfield. So if an airfield's 4 points in 4 areas, I can't target it. But if I hit it enough and get enough critical successes, I will take out all those point targets, if that
So
makes sense.
a whole new mechanic compared to just the boom chit thing we've been used to, or the few bomber missions we've had where it simply had to just get to the other end of the board. This is a whole new.
Yeah, and so it's going to make one of these really interesting pieces that there either may become a point of can't get there from here, i.e., all the bombers in the game have dropped their bombs, and if you think about it, if you have 3 bombers, you can't take out an airfield. Best case, I can get a critical success with each one of those attacks, and I will get 3 points and 3 areas. And
Have
so
that
it
multiple
means
elements of at least
right,
two
right.
engine
So
bombers.
yeah, so that's where there's just got to kind of be a balance where it talks about the number of bombers you want in the scenario versus what those aircraft can do, and you got to kind of match it to your card, because if you're not careful, you just may not be able to get there from here. In the old
And
wording.
when I was looking at that, I was thinking about, this game's supposed to keep things simple. And I was thinking about simple mechanics that would create more granularity and almost house ruling something, or, maybe you're somebody will even like this, but taking it to where if you had a critical success, where you had an additional die roll, where it was a support trestle hit on a bridge, it was a magazine hit on a ship, it was a crossing runway hit on the
Sure,
airfield
yeah.
where
Yeah,
you
put that weapon
were
precisely where it needs to be to
exactly that luck, that moment when that SBD puts that bomb right through the freaking hangar of the freaking Akagi and hits all those aircraft loaded with fuel, and boom, we lose a carrier. I think that with the six-sided die, that there's some really simple mechanics that could be thrown in on each of these that would just make the game have more narrative drama, is I think what I'm looking for.
Well, so that
When you just talk
drama,
about hits and critical hits and just 1 through 4, it just a little vanilla for me. I mean,
well,
and I'm coming from a different place. I'm coming from 30K and
no, you're
armor
coming from
facings
30K,
and
and that's
pins and
exactly going to be my point. Is that
exactly.
there's the moment when the one dude with a rocket launcher shoots halfway across the board, hits a large vehicle, penetrates it, and blows it up, and you go, didn't see that coming.
Yeah, the last trooper with a plasma rifle.
Yeah, exactly.
Glances the last hull point on a knight, and
Your
then the
last-
knight's
yeah.
roll, it wanders forward into the line of guardsmen that the guy just glanced a point from and blows up all the guardsmen as
Exactly.
it detonates
So-
hitting the ground.
so
I mean, I
that-
know we're not going to get to that level of granularity,
Well, but I think if we keep thinking about that, those are some of the frustrations because I'm used to games with that where you go, I can't believe I just did something so stupid as to kill my entire front line by actually killing the enemy.
Yeah.
But some of those things are what we miss. It's like what we brought up with the 4-engine bombers, that if I'm an advantaged fighter back there, there is no chance, actually advantaged or neutral, there is no chance a single bomber can shoot me down on any single pass. Not possible. There is no game mechanic to get us there. So you already missed some of that drama, and you go, what about having the ace gunners that just gunned that 109 that was rolling up?
I'm reading a book on the Solomon Islands right now, and I read an account where there was a Zero that rolled in on a ridge and was trying to shoot up Marines, and it shot up the Marines, and the Japanese are like cheering, and they realize in the last second that the pilots become completely target affixed, and it flies right over the Marines and crashes into their lines. I mean, crap like that happening,
Banzai!
Banzai! My Zero!
Yeah, exactly. So and when you keep extrapolating that same mechanic, it's the same question about, so light flak can't shoot down a dive bomber that comes off at neutral instead of going all the way to disadvantaged. Just not possible. He can't get knocked down below disadvantage. And here in the same case, there's a point where I can't get there from here with the bomb loads I have. And you just kind of sit there and you go, okay, I get it. But I wish there was that catastrophic moment where if I roll, a catastrophic hit instead of a critical hit, and I get all 6s, then guess what? It eliminates the target in one pass.
Exactly. Like you get the pin, and then you get the 6 on the freaking pin table, and boom, explodes result. Yep.
Hey Brett, that's 30K 7th edition. You probably haven't played that in a while. So. I feel bad because I haven't played it either since Adepticon. So I hear there's this game called the Horus Heresy where we play with old Warhammer rules. Haven't played it. So but yeah,
it's a fun game.
And that's one of those things that I pick on Andy and I pick on the rules about this, but it's something you're going to have to give up. You have to give up, just like that same level of granularity of wanting really realistic simulations of aircraft energy. I'm giving that up to have a fun game. I'm giving up the ability to have that sniper tail gunner shot to have a fun game. So am I sore about those things? No. Did I wish it was there? Sure. Is that what house rules are for? Absolutely. I think we've made the point on this podcast more than once that they're not going to show up and steal your models and box up your game set and take it home if you make house rules.
No, I mean, we had Andy on the show, and he said, buy models from third-party people, and I'll give you cards.
Yeah.
I mean,
he wants
love that guy.
Wants to go out and try something. So
exactly,
make a house rule. And I guess my point is make a house rule and share it in the Blood Red Skies Ready Room, because we've had some great discussions recently about things that guys want to tweak one way or the other in the rules, and guys will get real passionate about, is that a needed tweak or is that not? The point is, if you guys want to do it in your own game, then absolutely do it. Add a critical dodge, add a catastrophic hit to ground attack, and play the game the way you want to fit the narrative. Because at the same time, while we keep saying, I wonder what the meta for the competitive gaming scene is going to be, I don't care. I want narrative players in this game. I know some of the
I'm
D1
the same way.
competitives, but I don't.
No, I'm the same way. And I completely will admit that I'm coming at this one from 30K, and I'm also coming at this from being a person that loves planes that are mud movers and don't shoot down other planes. I mean, I'm fascinated by that, and that's probably why I want such a level of granularity. And you're right, there are some things you got to give up. The fighter guys have given up managing energy states and have a really compressed stat line for firepower. So I get it. We're trying to keep the game simple. We're trying to keep the game playable, and that, like you said, that's where house rules come in, and that's where, if that's your thing, it's something that you and your group can throw that in there and play it that way.
Right. Well,
Saw some additional details in there that looked interesting for I think they're called target qualities.
I was exactly going to start talking about that, because that also changes the whole dynamic of some of this.
I think so. I mean, we talked a little bit about a catastrophic roll or something like that, but there is if you have a critical success rolls, it has impacts on a target, or some certain target qualities require critical success in order to suffer damage. You want to talk about those?
Yeah, so we'll start with the most zero-like one, just like the vulnerable one. There's volatile. So volatile, while it doesn't mean you're going to blow up the whole place at once, it at least allows you to add +1 firepower die. So if you've got POL sites, ammunition storage facilities, things like that are going to be volatile. So it means you're at least going to get an extra die. I think that maybe I would make a recommendation. Maybe some of these should be volatile with a number behind them, like some of the other ones. So when you're hitting a like a rail yard, that should probably be like volatile 3, because if you sneeze, you'll probably find something to explode. But as you go to some of the other effects, you'll see they'll have a number after them. Like a good example is mobile with a number. So like mobile 1, mobile 2. And you're like, why does it have a number? Well, is it how fast it is? Is it no, because the target isn't moving on the board. But what it is it's how many firepower dice you lose. So you can move in this current set, move that target marker a number of inches equal to that at the end of the turn. I really think that at this scale, you're not going to dramatically change how things go by moving a mobile target. The success of a mobile target is that bombing runs will suffer a minus penalty in firepower. And if it's actually a ship, it doubles it. So if you think about that, think about, not just hitting a convoy on the road, but if you're trying to hit a ship that's all of a sudden putting, full hard rudder turns in and things, and is trying to defeat, especially bombing attacks, not a torpedo attack, it's going to have huge implications there. So those are kind of cool. There's other ones like armored, which allow you, to defend against strafing dice and basically just ignore some of the dice that are in the attack. Hardened targets, similar to armored, but just defeats bombing runs instead of strafing attack. And one point of clarification, I don't think the wording is said there. I'm going to check, but my understanding is a dive bomb attack is a bombing run. So if you're employing the same kind of ordnance, so if you're doing a dive bomb, then if you're attacking a hardened target, not an armored target, you're still losing some firepower dice there. We'll have to see if Andy and the guys weigh in on that, or if they change the wording. But yeah, there's a lot of qualities out there that are kind of interesting, and I hate to say this because looking at some other people's add-ons to the rule.
We lost Doug. Okay, hey, you're closer. Launch the SAR Helo.
We're not doing too bad for a bunch of randos that just read through some beta rules and are just talking about it. It almost seems like we have notes.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're doing great. The one thing I didn't see, Brett, until Doug comes back is, did you see anything that was adding granularity on like different weapon types?
There's a whole section about the type of ordnance you use. You get bonus firepower for different types of ordnance depending on what you're doing.
Okay.
Okay, and of course, forgive me because my knowledge is not great on this stuff, but like strafing. So I think the idea is like, I was imagining you could strafe with a 109, right? Doesn't have to be a bomber. And oh, by the way, 109s could also have a bomb, right? So you could, if you had a bomb.
Yeah.
But anyway, if let's say maybe something more like normal would be like a JU-88 or something. You can make a strafing run, but it could also carry bombs, clearly. I guess having some additional ordnance gives you additional firepower for your strafing run,
Okay.
because the idea is like you're going to strafe with your guns and drop a bomb or something. And I think there's some other things like that too. You know,
Yeah, I was.
torpedoes have some advantages or some weapon
Yeah,
effects with
was there like?
torpedoes that are
That's what I
unique.
was wondering. Is there like a long lance torpedo for the Type 93 for the Japanese?
I don't know about the aircraft specifically, but I
Okay.
think it's going to be on their cards. There was a note I saw somewhere like some aircraft had two torpedoes, like the HE-111 was equipped to drop two torpedoes, and you
Okay.
could do that. It gives you that difference, and I think it might have said something like refer to it'll be indicated on the aircraft data card or something like that.
Okay,
Uh,
that makes sense.
but
Because
yeah,
I
there's
was
all
just
kinds
wondering
of
if there
stuff
were like
depending.
specific, and I just didn't see it in there. I looked, but I didn't see like specific types of weapons or anything like that.
Yeah, you get
So
so even just like a normal bomb run, you get extra firepower depending on what kind of bomber it is. So there's a big difference between a light bomber and what a heavy bomber gets. I think you get like additional firepower points.
yeah, that
Oh,
makes sense. It looks like Doug is completely out.
oh yeah, his internet's crashed. Well,
It
that's a
says, it
bummer.
says, "Hey, you guys keep talking and shut off the bot when you're done."
Oh man, what a bummer.
Hey, clean up the store and take off when you guys are done. You know what we can do is we can just cap this. We can talk a little bit more and then just
I'm
kind of
back,
say,
bitches.
Oh, he's back. Okay.
"Oh,
Fucking
so
Hargray internet, the worst piece of
oh, they
goddamn
are,
shit.
they are, they
God.
are." I haven't heard that in
Oh,
forever. That's what I had when I was out on Ladies Island.
oh, it's fucking horrible. Horrible, I tell you. I'd rather have a can and a string for my internet to be better. I'd have
Yeah,
AOL dial-up. It'd be better than this.
I told Brett, I said, "You're closer. Launch the SAR helo. We
Yeah,
lost
no
Doug."
shit. I'm like, it goes disconnected, and I look at it for a moment. I go, huh, it's gonna come back, and it just keeps beeping and beeping. I look at my internet icon, and it's just spinning, and I'm like, motherfucking Hargray. God. All
Well,
right.
I was wondering for a minute if we had some Warlord was jamming us, but then again I remember we weren't talking about a Games Workshop product.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, I bought my contrast paints, damn it. Go fuck yourself.
You got a cease and desist and they pull the plug on your internet.
Yeah, exactly. Screw you guys. Oh shit. So I have no idea what the last thing you heard me pontificating about was, and I really don't care. Who gives a
It was something
I think we were
about
just
critical hits with weapons, and then I was asking Doug because I'll be honest, I've read this, but what I was looking for was their weapon granularity. Because the one thing I kept asking myself is, I'm like reading all this, and I'm like, it's making it sound. I mean, I know we got the 1, 2, and 3 for firepower is typically the way this is going to be done, even with ground attack. But are there going to be bonuses for certain weapons types, like? Like
so
the
it
long
doesn't
lance
look like
torpedo
there
with the
is.
Japanese.
Right. So it doesn't
Such a superior weapon.
it doesn't
there
look like
kind of
there
is.
but
Okay.
it doesn't seem to say that there couldn't be. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of count the firepower for bomb loads details as being kind of a weapon speciality stuff, and then you talk about like the ordnance bonuses for strafing, and then the
well, yeah. So
torpedo
that's
special stuff and dive bombing special stuff.
well, I guess I was looking at it from a different angle that there's not a granularity of weapons there. It's granularity of airplanes. So
You're right. You're right.
if I want to bring more or less firepower, I bring a different kind of bomber. So,
Yeah.
heavy 4-engine guys have 4 firepower, twin engine guys 2, singles 1 firepower. Doesn't matter. They can all hit area targets. And if they get a critical success, they get an area and a point target. Doesn't matter. Which is one of the confusions, and I'm trying to reread this and see if I missed it somewhere. But if I hit a target with a 4-engine bomber, yeah, I get 4 firepower, but I still have no opportunity to do extra successes other than, like I said, the critical success to get a target or to get an area and a point hit. Yeah, so that's fine. And I'm glad you brought it up, Brett. I really think the strafing ordnance, basically rockets, that's pretty damn cool. That basically on that attack, you run in, you shoot your rockets. It's kind of it doesn't say it's a one-time use, but I think it's intended to be a one-time use, and it gives you 2 extra firepower attack on that one only.
It would make sense it was a one-time use. I mean,
I
everybody
could
carried 8 rockets and they'd let them go in one vol.
Yeah,
but I could put a bomb on my 109F.
Yes, you could.
And you can put them on your Focke-Wulfs too, because the Hitler was an idiot and he tried to turn everything into a bomber.
Here's the point where I get frustrated though, is that it counts as a laden aircraft. I'm like, son of a bitch, I'm tagged with laden again just for taking these damn rockets.
They basically
Yeah.
become fighters until they make their run, right? I mean, bombers until they make their run. So you still
Yeah,
have to have an
so
escort.
yeah, so it's funny, and I get it. You got to have a counterbalance there because otherwise everyone's just going to show up in fighters with rockets and have a good time. But it's just so frustrating for me because it's the iconic look of a Marine Corps Corsair
Yep.
shooting rockets in the middle of a strafing pass. I'm like, I want to be that badass. And well, I hate to fly a laden aircraft, so I don't really want to be that badass.
Well, thinking back on that long pause, and you're saying, what do we think about people who are going to argue that this is, I'm disadvantaged in making a bomb run, and I was kind of like, wait a minute, what am I missing? Because my whole perspective is just from reading all this Malta stuff. I mean, these raids were 8 Ju-88s and 40 109Fs, and so I don't think it's going to be uh, as big a problem if you're playing it. Well, I don't know if I can say playing it right, but you know what I mean? That's kind of my perspective. It's like, yeah, you're going to have bombers, but that's not going to be the only thing on the table. You would have escorts or something, unless
Well,
it's a
right.
scenario
So
that doesn't
especially for
necessarily call for
multi-engine
'em.
bombers, I think my concern, or where some people might run into a concern, is the thing about just kind of fighter bomber missions, and it kind of goes back to the mechanics question of if a P-38 is out there on Normandy doing interdiction missions, shooting up convoys, and it has to behave like a multi-engine airplane. That poor dude's going to be in the chute and he's going to have a Focke-Wulf roll in behind him. Well, that was a real world concern. If he's out there by himself pummeling the target, he's not going to be able to guard his own six. Sucks to be him.
You think about the scenarios. You want to talk about those at all?
So we can. So what I will say is, to manage expectations, the scenarios are a really cool mix, not of all air to ground. So don't think that the scenarios that you're going to see in Airstrike are all going to be air to ground centric. Remember, Airstrike is kind of recompiling some of the FAQs and some of the errata and fixing some things in the game and adding the ground attack piece to it. So the new scenarios that are coming out, I think, are really cool. I think they have some neat special rules to them, but there's still some fighter stuff in there, at least the first two. So scenario 5, kind of the one I like, clubbing baby seals, transport hunt. And of course, me, who's kind of a big Mediterranean theater kind of guy, Palm Sunday Massacre, poor, Ju-52s and everything else trying to roll across the Med as they're having fighters roll in over the top of them to shoot them down, not even making it to the beach line. Things like that are what this mission is about. The cool part is you'll go out there and deploy as the escort. The interceptor puts one of their elements out there, and the battle is kind of joined at that point. And then you have to go actually search for transports, because once again, the assumption is the transports are down low over the water trying to sneak in, but you're trying not to get shot down by all the escorts that are either on the board or in high cover. And then once you go into each one of the areas and do a search in there, it's a pilot action. So rather than climbing for advantage, shooting, outmaneuvering, you can make a pilot skill test and see if you've spotted any aircraft. And then once they're spotted, the escorting player then has to deploy a number of aircraft within 12 inches of the searching pilot, and obviously not on a table edge, so they can't run away immediately. And they're disadvantaged, so they are just seals waiting to be clubbed.
Well, it's funny. That's one of the very first missions you talked to me about. I think you sent me some artwork or something from a museum about it when we were first really kicking around the idea of doing something in the Mediterranean. That's your fault, really, Doug. You were the one that said, hey, you should think Mediterranean. I didn't know jack about the Mediterranean. I was thinking like, North Africa stuff. But man, this has been awesome. As I dig into this Malta idea, I get so geeked out and I've learned so much. And I think these scenarios, every single one of these scenarios I read, with the exception of the Palm Sunday one, because that's not necessarily Malta, but certainly Mediterranean, it really turns me on to, man, all of these missions are like perfect for a Malta campaign.
Right. And a lot of them will absolutely, fit into some things that we're trying to do. And you talk about the photos I sent you. I was up at an air museum up near Oxford, Connecticut, and had this entire section devoted to one of the air wings and showing all the different types of aircraft and types of missions they flew, and it was just fascinating to sit there and read about the Palm Sunday Massacre and all the different kinds of aircraft. Because the reason I kind of liked it is it was an air battle where a lot of different varieties of aircraft got in on the escort and on the interceptor side, and so you really could play kind of whatever you brought to the board, and it didn't mean you had to have a specific air army.
Any gladiators?
No gladiators. No, not.
That's an
We know
inside
how
joke.
Doug feels
banning
about gladiators and swordfish.
Yeah. The swordfish and the gladiator will never be in a scenario I produce if I have anything to say about it.
I'm making night witches at some point. You can just shoot them down. That's just you can do it, but you have at it.
Whatever, and you can bring your POs over in Korea as well, and we'll just shoot them down with night fighters. So, good luck with that. Have fun. No, I'm sorry. I have to draw the line somewhere, and at propeller-driven horrible biplane fighters and torpedo aircraft. Just because you sank the Italian Navy, I don't care. Who cares?
It was the Italian Navy. It was built by Fiat. Found on failed Italian attempted transportation. Isn't that what Fiat stands for?
Exactly. All right, so let's talk about one of the other scenarios. So we talked about the Palm Sunday Massacre, the kind of the transport bopping scenario. There's a high altitude intercept scenario, which is pretty cool because it just changes a little bit about how you do some of the bomber escort piece. But once again, it isn't changing any of the core mechanics of the game. It still has a lot of the rules for the bombers that are in there, but it allows your interceptors to behave differently in high cover, which I think is pretty cool.
Like how the defender has to basically climb to altitude. Like once the alert comes in, these bombers are inbound. Just like in Malta, I'm thinking you have to fly to the south to get to altitude so they can make a quick turn and be at the same altitude in time to make a difference.
Well, and the other piece is just because you were a fighter with a really big engine didn't mean you were any good at high altitude. If the aircraft wasn't tuned for that, then it was a problem. And so once again, if you're an aircraft without the great climb card and you're trying to climb for advantage here, the assumption is getting to an advantage state is already something well above a standard game's advantage state. We're really working in the high altitude bands here. So you have to pass a maneuver check to do it unless you have a great climb card. So it really helps break out some of the higher altitude capabilities of these aircraft and makes it an interesting challenge.
That's what I'm appreciating about these scenarios. Even if they don't really have a very overt airstrike component to it, they have these I think thoughtful mission things added in, whether it's part of the deployment or, like you said, some special rule about altitude and the way aircraft are going to perform, that sets a cool narrative, I think.
Yeah. You've got scenario 7 priority target, really a good basic intro to how generic ground attack would work for an interdiction mission. And I'll say it again, remember, these are interdiction strikes. They are not close air support. You're not going to find scenarios where you're rolling in mass, and I'll say in mass, and doing close air support for ground troops. We'll come back to that talking about scenario 10, but it's kind of a special beast in there. Scenario 8, sneak attack, really cool because this is one that plays on this whole alert status. And as the attacker, you kind of have to build an attack plan for a turn number and table edges you're going to arrive. And so there's a little bit of sneakiness to this whole attack. And then once again, as the defender, how are you going to make sure that you've got the right aircraft that can begin arriving in the area once the alert has sounded? Because once again, you as a defender, you don't deploy any elements of your aircraft at the beginning. They only show up when the alert has sounded. And so there's a cool twist to it that obviously plays well into a Malta scenario or really any airfield attack. But you can put basically a ground strip alert out there on one of your airfields. So
I was thinking Battle of Britain when I read that one. I was
remembering
that video we watched, what it was, the 12 hours or how many hours that saved Britain. So that one that goes moment to moment and shows all the aircraft moving around and the way they were vectoring everything and putting certain people in relief, putting certain people in reserve, and managing that air fight at a strategic level. That's what that mission made me think of.
Yeah, these are definitely theater non-specific. I can't help but think of Malta just because I've been so in the weeds with it that as soon as I read these, I'm like, oh man, I'm imagining recounts of things I've read from books and comparing it to this scenario and thinking, oh, this is exactly like this wave of whatever.
It's funny you say that, because I think it is exactly that. It's based on what you're reading, because I'm just doing all this Solomon Island, Guadalcanal, and as I'm reading through this stuff again today, in my head, I'm just relating it to those things. So I mean, that is one strength of it. It is, I hate the word generic, but it is loose enough, or it is pliable enough that it can be played in several different narrative scenarios.
Very,
And
very
that is the
applicable.
one good thing. Exactly.
Well, and that's a strength and a little bit of a weakness, because you get the generic scenarios in the box set, and it really lays out exactly the pilot skills and exactly the aircraft that you're going to use and how they're broken down into elements. And then when you and those are always listed as suggested elements, but it gives you a good starting point. Then you roll into some of these, and it literally says, the attacking player has 2+ elements with at least 2 aircraft assigned to each. They got to be from the same squadron. Attacking player gets an extra element of bombers for every 2 elements the attacker's deployed, and then tells you the kind you can pick. So you still have to have a discussion about pilot skill balancing and how you do that. And I think that's a separate topic for game balance and for kind of how you and your house rules want to do it. Because I know, Brett, you and I, the last time we played 2 weeks ago, we changed the point values a little. We kind of started treating pilot skill 3 as the freebie. Everybody gets pilot skill 3s. You get some points back if you suck up and take some pilot skill 2s, and you lose points going up 4 and 5 based on what you want to put out there. But
I like that too. I like that approach too. I like.
I liked it because I always felt it felt a little strange that I was paying anyway for substandard pilots. I always felt like, shouldn't I be rewarded for taking a bunch of these rookies out there, taking a bunch of nuggets airborne and not getting them shot down? I should have some benefit. But I understand why they're trying to do it, to create a linear game balance. But in a scenario like this, once again, I think it's really up to the players to decide, okay, how are we splitting up those pilot skills to make it equitable?
And that's the thing I'm eager for as we get deeper with this Malta thing is, even if we just take some of these scenarios, if not all of them, and work them in, is to more clearly define what the elements are and what the skill levels are and all that. Partly because I got to know how many aircraft I got to pay too. But
yeah, exactly. Well, the good thing about this scenario is the alert specifically has a whole chunk in there about the alert. Hey, if too many enemy aircraft are on the table, you get extra dice to sound the alert. You get a lot of dice if you end up with more than 12 enemy aircraft plus multi-engine. You get another die. It kind of gives you this feeling that the more things you can stack up in your favor, the alert will eventually get sounded, and either your ground launch interceptors can take off, or you can bring in your airborne interceptors. So it seems like a pretty cool game. Scenario 9, another bomber centric one, but it's an attempt to get home at that point. So I
thought this one was really clever.
I haven't taken a detailed look at it. It seems kind of interesting, but I'll be honest that when I looked at it, I'm like, okay, that one's going to be fairly straightforward mechanics. I'm just trying to break through, and so I haven't really read through it to see where some of those tweaks are in there, where some of those key game design components are. It seems like it's basically an attempt to having to run through all those guys, get the last of your dudes through, and get your escorts back or get your escorts close enough to be able to escort the bomber and drag them back home. Then there's scenario 10. Now, scenario 10 seems really cool, except the way that we normally play. Because once again, it's geared on the front lines, and it's really geared on building out this narrative element, and being able to get in there, do something resembling close air support, or to be able to do some at least interdiction bombing that would influence the front lines. But here's the problem: the variant they have in there is really for supporting bolt action or cruel seas, neither of which do I play right now. So it doesn't help me to want to play the scenario, because I go, oh man, I got to find somebody who wants to be playing bolt action, and now I got to borrow somebody's army. Or
can you not play it without the crossover?
You can, but I don't think it's anywhere near as cool, because without the crossover, you're not flying from one board into another. Variant 2 is the spotter piece of it, which is kind of interesting. To me, it's not as interesting as really trying to do a close air support attack. But the fact is the overarching goal of this scenario is to be able to make a crossover from bolt action to cruel seas, where you fought your way in, put your single aircraft into that other game, and then played it out. Because the way it's designed is you place your aircraft more than 6 inches away from the quote front line. The other guys are 6 inches behind the front line, and you basically alternate playing all of your elements there. And then the whole point to attacking is to be able to enter quote unquote the front lines. There's really not a mechanic for
the table's kind of divided up into like my side, your side kind of thing.
Yeah. There's really not a mechanic for expending your payload, not in a bolt action or cruel seas environment.
Okay. I think it's cool that they included that, because I think there's some obvious crossover for the other game systems. Whether most players play the other systems or not, it's cool that they included that as something.
I know when we were talking to John, when we had John in here, that was one of the things he was highlighting. Was he talked several times, and it kind of led me to read into the rules a little bit more about diving into other tables, and that's where I got that. And I won't lie, thinking about that and the way those mechanics would work and how cool that would be, it's the same stuff we're trying to do in the 30K place, where we're trying to relate, Adeptus Titanicus 30K, and in the future
Mortalis,
Battlefleet Gothic, and then in Battlefleet Gothic having Zone Mortalis battles that are taking place in Battlefleet Gothic and relating multiple tables together in these huge campaigns. I mean, it's a gateway drug without a doubt. It's something that may get me playing bolt action. I mean, not that I haven't been looking at it, but
let me spoil the fun for you at one point. We're used to playing combined campaigns where what you're doing on the Zone Mortalis table is putting some influence into the overall campaign tracker. What they're doing on the double team table is doing the same. The problem with this is it relies on 2 simultaneous games going. And so that's where it becomes a little difficult. And I do like what they do for Cruel Seas, because for bolt action, it's really you're coming in and providing kind of like an immediate air. So if you enter the action in bolt action, you're available the next turn in that bolt action game, and then in bolt action you would finish that up, you place it back on the Blood Red Skies table. So there's going to be a delay there. But where it kind of gets the game out of order is in Cruel Seas, you can hang out and wait. And so you can wait multiple turns in the quote unquote Cruel Seas world in order to amass enough aircraft for an airstrike. So I sit there and I go, well, now I have to keep individually tracking guys I'm adding into the Cruel Seas game. We keep playing the Cruel Seas terms, and in Blood Red Skies, a lot can go on. What happens if a squadron in that next turn gets enough boom chits to get sent home? I'm like, well, crap, did I just lose the guys that were in the Cruel Seas game, or do they get to attack before they go home? Just a few questions like that. And once again, that's house rule kind of stuff. That's individual, cool crossover event kind of questions you answer. But it made my head hurt trying to think about playing two separate tables simultaneously and having to go, okay, even though we finished this bolt act or this Blood Red Skies turn, we got to stop because we got to see if that fighter survives and comes back into the game next turn.
I'm less well read on scenario 10, but I didn't take it that way. I was expecting it to be something where you and I play a game of Blood Red Skies, then maybe the next weekend you come over and we pick up where we left off in our Cruel Seas game and apply whatever modifiers from that previous game.
It is truly flying into that game. So flying down and into a bolt action event, or flying down into Cruel Seas. Really neat when you got all of the stuff synced up. I just think I would love to see it in practice to see how that timing works out. Because once again, I don't play bolt action, don't play Cruel Seas, don't know how fast those games move. Compared to Blood Red Skies that can move pretty fast. Maybe the answer is put more aircraft into the Blood Red Skies game so it slows down.
No, I think the obvious answer here is we need to get with Andy Chambers and freaking John Russell and tell them they just need a 1/200 scale everything game. We just need epic Blood Red Skies. That's what we need. I mean, that's where we're going.
Oh yeah, because Andy didn't ruin my life enough with epic the first time around in the 40K universe.
Andy can get you on epic 2.0.
No.
The World
And
War
Andy,
II epic
if you're listening to
deployment.
this, I hate you.
He loves you, Andy. He's got a pillow with your picture on it that he
I
snuggles
hate you,
every
Andy
night.
Chambers.
One of those big waifu pillows.
I know, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna get Doug one of those man pillows of Andy Chambers. Snuggle with.
This podcast has gone downhill rapidly. So I guess I'm going to ask this. So is that what it's like at Wargamer Camp? Did you guys do a lot of snuggling? Did you snuggle there with your game design heroes?
You know what? It was absolutely, I gotta say, a blast. You can tease me as much as you want. Yes, Chris went to camp.
Chris went to camp. It was awesome.
Chris went to camp and got classes from Henry Steele, one of the best painters from the UK. Chris got a detailed freaking 3D printing class on resin printing, which, oh, by the way, the Blood Red Skies models that are out there for freaking resin printing suck. So if we're going to go down that rabbit hole, we're going to have to learn CAD too, which I don't know if I got that kind of investment.
That's not going to happen.
But it was amazing.
Okay,
it was,
don't spoil all the don't spill all the beans and spoil all the
even found a boyfriend for Brett. I mean, I just, it was a great weekend.
Does he wear Ranger panties? That's all I want to know.
You know what? I guarantee you, the conversations, the emails I was getting from Matt as he was driving back from Wargamers Camp to Gainesville today, he was like, dude, here's the list of crap I bought. Brett said he's playing Japanese, and my uncle was my great grandfather was a freaking Marine in freaking World War II, and here's every Marine thing on freaking Amazon, and it's coming tomorrow. So
that's
yeah,
fine. As long as you explain the Wargamers wardrobe for Brett's house. I mean,
well, see, the only thing I'm worried about with Matt,
black socks, Ranger panties, and a green T-shirt.
I'm the only thing I'm worried about with Matt is also an Ultramarine player, and I'm just
there's gonna be some Ultramarine love.
Just too much bathhouse blue going on in that relationship.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have to keep close tabs on Brett.
Yeah, freaking Ultra.
Well, tell us,
Chris,
come join us in the pain.
You were sending us pictures when you were there, and you were saying you got a bunch of games in, and you shared the game with a bunch of folks.
I did.
I got new starts. Right?
I got, and the funny thing that seemed to resound across the community is that it was a lot of the guys that were prior military that wanted to play Blood Red Skies. And we had a Blood Red Skies going right next to a Flames of War, and that was pretty neat. Not that they were crossing over, but it was just neat. That there was this whole with everybody, and that was on 40K day, and all of us were kind of like, okay, let's get the smelly 40K players out of here as fast as we can. They only came for one. Oh, dude, they only came for one event, and it was like we were walking around and go, yep, Gray Army, Gray Army, Gray Army, Gray Army. Primer was the.
But I have a Thunderhawk. It's awesome.
I do. I've got the latest and the greatest army ever. I'm just an independent character, and I feel only good stuff. But yeah, it was bad. But anyway, but yeah, there were a lot of guys that were really interested. I had 3 guys while I was there. 3 guys order the box set.
Nice.
So they were all like, "Hey, this is exactly what I was looking for. I was looking for something that's not high stress." I was telling you, it's kind of funny. There were some guys that were driving up from Bragg that are military, and they went by Wright-Patterson Air Force Base on the way up. And
Fort Bragg has supply officers too.
So no, I don't know if I can say this on a podcast, but First Special Forces Group, some PSYOPs guys. Yeah, they were Ranger panty guys, but they were Brett's kind of Ranger panty guys.
Catnip for
fanboy Ranger, exactly, fanboy Ranger panty guys, snake eater kind of guys. Yeah, they all went by Wright-Patterson, and they walk in and they're all wearing, like, one of them had a Memphis Belle t-shirt on. It's like, I got a game for you.
Stop hanging out with you people. You're disturbing.
It was a good freaking result. It was a good turnout, and I finally got some freaking games in. Now I've just got to find some local players. Well, Brian over in freaking Lansing's all in, so he's already bought a 7 started painting. So hopefully,
well, I think there's a moment of military history here we have to lay flat because we don't know our audience, and so we know there's a couple veterans in our audience. Thank goodness there's some devil dogs out there. We know there's probably some Army. We know there's definitely some Air Force out there with Mitch and some of the other guys. So we have to lay flat what Ranger panties are because they may not know. So devil dogs, if you know what silkies are, those horrible shorts we've had for years at the exchange that only come in one size, extra small. The Rangers have them as well, but they wear them in black, and they still have them. They haven't gotten them rid in their service. So we'll leave that there.
In the regiment, that's right.
The regiment still wears them.
They got female Rangers now too, right? That's got to work out well.
I'm not touching that one with a 10-foot pole. We're moving on.
Anyway, Wargamers Camp was a blast. Hopefully they're going to do it next year. I don't know where the site's going to be. There was some serious talk about it moving out the Pacific because this is the second year it's been held. If you've got time and you want to get into everything, I mean, I played 30K, I played BattleTech, I played Dust, I played Blood Red Skies, I watched games of Flames of War, I watched people playing Bolt Action. It was everything.
So I'm going to throw the gauntlet down because
Yep.
in case I know they're not listening to the podcast, but after I call them and make fun of them, maybe they'll listen to this episode.
Mhm.
So Veteran Gamer Reloaded, Slaughterfest next year. You better bring War Games Camp out there to the West Coast. San Diego at the casino, having a good time. I think it would be a perfect place for it.
So, but the thing is, you gotta get the camp experience in there. So it could go San Diego, but
What?
it needs to
You
go
have
out
to
in
have stinky
Santee.
people around.
It needs to go out in Santee. It needs to go out in the desert, dude. I'm telling you, just having that freaking aura where the whole world goes away for 4 freaking days, and you just consume yourself with freaking beer. Michael Montelago came from freaking RFI, and he made Texas brisket. I ran this morning because it's going to take me, I'm thinking 3 to 4 weeks to get the calories off from 4 days of War Gamers Camp. Thank you, Emily and freaking Ryan Kimmel. You guys are the greatest. But yeah, I'm serious. If you guys get a chance to go to War Gamers Camp, I think we had 50 this year. It's like $400. It's 4 days. All your food's included. It is a great experience. Henry Steele is committed.
Oh wait, and you got a camp sash, didn't you, to put all your little
little
we activities on, merit badges? How
we
special!
Absolutely had merit badges. We had merit badges. We got beer glasses. We got 3 posters. We got dog tags.
Let's just leave it at merit badges. Really, merit badges. Really?
Oh no, dude, they straight up own it. The year before, it was kind of funny because they got fanny packs with Velcro on it to put the things on, but they ordered them from some store in China, and it said like adult large, and when they got there, they were like adult large, starving Chinese size. So, needless to say, for some of the war gamers we had at camp, it was going to take 3 or 4 of those fanny packs to get around their manliness. So yeah, so this year they went with sashes, and they went the opposite direction this year. I don't know if this is what I have is so much a sash or a hammock. So,
nice.
But no, dude, it was a great time. Those guys just put on such a great show. We had Australians there. We had a guy from Denmark. Dude's covered in freaking Viking tattoos and plays World Eaters, and came over just for War Gamers Camp. I mean, if you want to talk about the nerdiest dudes and some of the coolest dudes in wargaming that live for wargaming, War Gamers Camp is a place for you. It is just an absolute blast.
People think about the look of your planes because you were busy cranking out some really nice looking Spitfires, if I recall.
So no, I was doing the Yak 3s from the Normandy Nima. So the Free French group that flew in, I actually got those on the board and shot down some Focke-Wulfs with them, which was very rewarding. But yeah, like I said, when
I actually read the rules. It's amazing when I read the rules. I can actually play.
Not only did I read the rules, I taught the rules, and I taught everything right.
Oh, I'm going to say we've ruined a whole
maneuver rule. So the outmaneuver rule was the one thing I did get wrong. So
nice work. Yeah.
So sorry, Chris Duncan. So, but yeah, it was good stuff, man. I had an absolute ball because it was just the best to go out there and play. I got my CMAT in today, and I'm thinking about seriously investing. By the way, guys, Deep Cut Studios, those guys are the absolute bomb. Those guys get mats here from Lithuania in 7 days. So if you're looking for some Blood Red Skies mats, those guys are amazing. And I think for $10,
what mat was that you got in again?
So I got the ocean mat from them.
Ocean. Okay, I heard something totally different.
Yeah, I got the ocean mat, and I've got the village mat from them too. So, or they're not the village mat, but the farmland mat.
Okay, like that farmland mat.
I know. I'm looking at what I'm going to try to do. I think for what we've got coming up at Adepticon, hint. I think I'm going to we need to look at some custom multi mats. I'm even thinking of doing a double mat. Like we could get like 8 people around, Winston Churchill in the bunker style, pushing airplanes around, and maybe do one of the corners of the island of Malta as like I'm thinking an 8x6.
You seen the Tiny War Games Malta mat? It's pretty stellar for 6x4.
I'm thinking bigger though, man. I'm thinking we're going to get everybody around, and Malta is going to be like the culmination of Adepticon. But we can talk about that ad nauseum later. But I'm also
Chris,
thinking about.
I do remind you. how short you are and how are you reaching the center of a 6-foot table? Are we like holding you out to move your models?
No, I told you Winston Churchill style. I'm gonna get one of those little wooden things.
Yeah, little
push
wooden things to
with.
push it along.
I'm gonna
Yeah,
have one
oh, God.
little Blood Red Skies hoop on it, so I can push them across
That
the
won't
board.
create any more Blood Red Skies like our all of our movement templates and everything, knocking everything over. I thought Brett was going to come unglued 2 weekends ago when we had everything, all the magnetic stuff sticking together and knocking everything over.
It's hilarious.
I can see that with AIM airplanes sticking together.
Oh, God.
The tape measure, it's
It's your tape measure. I haven't had that happen yet, but as soon as you said
it was pretty funny. So you want to talk about watching two OCD people lose their minds? It's trying to do this all with the wrong tools.
No, but one of the things I was thinking about with Deep Cut Studios doing custom mats, I mean, it would not be hard to draw the flight decks of all these different carriers with Midway coming up, hint hint, from Blood Red Skies, and doing a 6x4 print that's just ships and islands and ground targets and stuff that we can throw out on our neoprene mat and just get a 6x4 printed and cut it when it comes to the house into individual little pieces. So I'm sure the Deep Cut Studio guys would probably be all for it. So just something to add a little bit of depth.
You can break out all your crafting supplies, your rotary knife, and
absolutely, man,
tools.
So yeah, you can call all your girlfriends and have them bring over their quilt supplies. You knew I was going there. You set that. You just like underhanded that softball right across the plate. All righty. I think we bored everybody enough.
Everyone's like, God, will this podcast
we've descended into complete banter. No, I tell you what, we're not a ramble cast, and from what I've been told by other people, they actually like it when we ramble.
Oh, we have plenty of rambling we could do, and we'll do that the next time.
Absolutely.
And this is kind of a point for all of the listeners out there, because I know some of you are actually listening to the podcast because I see the stats. All 3 of you, thank you very much for downloading our podcast. But for those of you that are listening, please give us some feedback. We'd love to hear either in the Blood Red Skies Ready Room, some specific topics you want us to talk about, specific rules questions you have. Don't feel that everything has to be run immediately to Andy Chambers, because the man is actually busy trying to release war games. So, run some things past us. We'll discuss it on the air. We'll give some feedback from what the wargaming community thinks. And when we're at a rules impasse, we'll just go to Andy, and the Grand Poobah himself will decree how it's going to be. Okay, who's ready to start?
Yeah, man.
Okay. Collect my thoughts for once. Put on my Barry White voice.
You're more like Chef from freaking South Park.
Fuck you. Oh, I never liked your assholes anyway.
Little crackers?
Exactly. Oh,
sounds like a potential outtake for an intro.
That is definitely an outtake. I've already been amassing my outtake clips, and thank God
outtake, man.
Thank God the recording was on, because that's going on the outtake reel. All right, trying to get serious here, so I don't have to totally mute everyone else in the background.